Our first presenter will be BDC's Lally Remintilla. She's managing partner of intellectual property-backed financing at BDC, and she's going to tell us a bit about how BDC can help companies leverage their IP to obtain financing. And as we just heard, Banto was successful in obtaining financing from BDC, and so now we'll hear about how that works. Welcome, Lally. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Jose, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm the managing partner for intellectual property-backed financing at BDC Capital, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. Are my slides up? There you go.
There we go.
So for those who are not familiar with the BDC, I will breeze through my slides just to talk about the BDC. I'll also be talking about what it means to compete in the intangibles economy. I'll focus most of my presentation to intellectual property-backed financing and how we do it here at the BDC, and then have some concluding remarks. So BDC is the Bank for Canadian Entrepreneurs. We are a Crown Corporation mandated to help Canadian entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized businesses grow to be global leaders and champions or strong domestic companies. We have a mandate to complement the current private sector financial system, and we have broad reach, having more than 62,000 entrepreneur clients, 2,400 employees, and a high degree of client satisfaction. We have three pillars. We have BDC financing, which is the lending arm of the bank. We've got BDC Capital, which is the investment arm of the bank, and we've got BDC Advisory Services, the consulting arm of the bank. The IP-backed financing team is part of BDC Capital. Being the investment arm of the BDC, we offer a broad range of equity, venture capital, and flexible growth and transition capital solutions to meet the needs of Canadian entrepreneurs who want to scale their businesses and be leaders both domestically or into global marketplaces. So now let's talk about competing in the intangibles economy. I think for any webinar or any talk about IP nowadays, we talked about how the economy globally is actually moving towards intangible assets. On the left is what I would say of a very popular slide and chart by Ocean Tomo, which shows that most of the value of the S&P 500 is now attributed to intangible assets. And by intangible assets, we think in terms of intellectual property rights, brands, know-how, intellectual capital that is held by companies. And in the right side, we talk about how companies across different leading countries actually believe that most of their growth is now attributable to intangible assets. Intangible assets, as I said, includes intellectual property rights. And so SMEs with registered intellectual property rights show a lot more potential in their ability to grow, in order to innovate, in order to expand both domestically and internationally. But the irony is, we all know that these companies do find it much more difficult to access financing, especially in the case of debt or non-dilutive financing, where a lot more lending decisions are based on the company's tangible assets, which we know a lot of these companies don't have. And so 2 years ago, in July 2020, we announced a $160 million fund, which is the Intellectual Property-Backed Financing Fund, to increase the competitiveness of Canadian companies like yours in the global marketplace. It's the first of its kind in Canada with 4 major objectives. One is to accelerate the growth of IP-rich companies across all knowledge-based industries and sectors. Second is to address the specific needs of certain underserved sectors where we know you need to have strong IP portfolios and intellectual property strategies in order to compete, but where we also know that there's a lack of access to capital in those markets. The third objective is to to facilitate advice and expertise to the portfolio companies that we have. What this means is that we act in a way to advise companies and connect them to the right strategists or IP professionals that can really help them in their needs. And then fourth is to open the doors to creating a more inclusive IP ecosystem. Most of the individuals you'll see in this webinar, such as my colleagues at CIPO and Explore IP, as well as IRAP, like we're all part of what we call an IP village because we're here for you and we're working collaboratively with each other in order to create more IP awareness, education, and provide support to companies. Now, as we know, really what this is meant to do is to provide the right amount of capital to companies in order to really help them execute on their needs. So now let's go to what intellectual property backed financing is and how we do it here at the BDC. So intellectual property backed financing, simply put, is attributing value to both the tangible and intangible assets of a company. So our investment decisions are no different from a traditional credit underwriting process or an equity underwriting process, but we pay closer view and look more deeply into a company's intangible assets and specifically its intellectual property portfolio in order to generate more insights as to what makes a company creditworthy, what makes them strong, and what really drives their future potential. And through this practice, what we're looking to do is to support growing, innovative, and ambitious company in their quest to be global leaders in their field. We do have an eligibility criteria. So in the case of growing companies, we work with companies that have already commercialized their IP and their offering with a minimum revenue threshold of $1 million over the last 12 months. In the case of innovation, we work exclusively with companies with registered intellectual property folios with at least one or two granted patents. And the reason for this is that this practice is integrated with IP or patent analytics and valuation techniques. And so we're using those patent portfolios to actually help us generate more insights on the company's competitive strength. And we're looking for companies that we can back in as far as their ambition and their plan and ability to execute on a global landscape. The investments we're looking to do are in the range of $3 to $10 million per company, and that would be in one or multiple rounds of financing. The financing products or solutions, rather, that we offer are very flexible. We can do term loans, we can do convertible notes, and we can also do equity investing. The advantages of this is that working with the BDC, we're able to provide bespoke and flexible terms, adapt repayment options to match your financial forecasts or your cash flow forecasts. Obviously, the non-dilutive aspect of our offerings can help you maintain control. And really, the view that we have with this fund and the big question that we're always asking ourselves is, how can we get more capital to companies earlier in the process? We are a team of experts. So I guess the history of it is that there's a team called Quantius that started IP-backed lending in 2016. The whole team has moved over into the BDC in order to manage this fund. And then our IP investment process, I would say it's not for the faint of heart. One of the things that I guess is an attribute of IP-backed financing is that there's greater due diligence involved in the company's IP portfolio, its competitive nature. And so there's a lot that we do in working with the companies. There's a lot of surveys, a lot of questions, a lot of interviews being asked throughout the process. And so in conclusion, this is what IP-backed financing here is at the BDC. I think the benefit to companies such as yours is that it's a more patient and flexible funding source. It's designed to provide more capital earlier in the process or earlier in the development of a company. It's managed by a team of experts that have been doing this kind of financing since about 6 years ago. And we are really a door towards a more extensive global network to support your ambitions. So with that, I want to thank everyone for your time and happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Lally. That was a great presentation. If anyone in the audience has questions, don't hesitate to pop them in the chat or the Q&A. I think that this type of investment and support for our Canadian companies is so critical, especially with the challenges that we have in valuing IP, and also with the growing importance of IP as seen in that Ocean Tomo chart, which is just astounding. I think it shows that something like 90% of the S&P 500 today is made up of intangible assets, which is really just points to the growing importance of intangibles. And on the accounting side, it hasn't really kept up in terms of that valuation and how to support those companies. And so I think this type of financing is just so important. So any questions for Lally? I don't see any at the moment. I think that was a very robust and complete presentation. And if we do have any questions afterwards, if we have time at the end of this hour, we'll also open it up for audience questions. And if anyone has questions later, we're happy to connect them with you as well, Lally. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jose. And if you need, anyone here in the audience needs more information, our website is bdc.ca/IP. Very easy to remember. And again, happy to connect on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Thank you so much.